everyone, welcome back to the Chelsweets kitchen. Today we have a lot going on and packing is taking on a whole new meaning for a trip. So I've done a tutorial in the past on how to make a wedding cake in terms of properly supporting it, adding a central dowel, everything you need to know to make a wedding cake. But this time I'm making a wedding cake in a different city. So I live here in Manhattan and my friend is getting married in Chicago. And I wanted to make her wedding cake. So we figured out the best way to do that was to actually have me prep all of my cake layers here and buttercream, as you can see, and then take it with me to Chicago and assemble the cake once I get there. The rationale behind that was just that I have my big mixer here, that beauty right over there, which is an 8-quart. I can make 4 batches of buttercream at a time, 3 batches of cake batter, and it just made the process a lot quicker. So I'm going to show you how I'm going to wrap all my cake layers, prep them to go in my carry-on, and also how I'm going to package my butter and what I'm going to do before I add it into my suitcase. And I'm actually bringing 8 batches of buttercream with me. I don't think that for this size of cake I'm going to use more than 6 batches, but I just want to be safe, and I have an 8-quart mixing bowl here that allows me to make 4 batches at once. So I was able to just make 2 of those, and I'm going to bring all of this with me to be super sure that I do not run out of frosting. There is nothing worse than running out of frosting when you are in the middle of making a cake, especially since I'm not bringing any ingredients with me. So I put 1 batch into here, and then this other massive batch is going to go into here. I got this container at the Container Store. It's not super expensive, it has nice latches, and an airtight seal, which I really like. It just makes me feel like the buttercream is going to stay nice and fresh. However, I also put it in this older container I had, which is not quite as secure. I'm going to wrap both of these containers in saran wrap just to make sure that everything stays nice and tight, no lids come off, nothing happens, because I'm going to be checking the bag with the frosting. So it's going to go through a lot more wear and tear than our cake layers, which I'm going to bring in a carry-on. So that will just super make sure that everything is good to go throughout my flight to Chicago. So now I'm going to attempt to put this buttercream as gracefully as I can into my container. Before I do that, I'm going to give it a really good stir to get it smooth, and I really like this container too because it's so wide. It's going to allow me to easily re-stir the buttercream before I add it to the cake down the road. This is a lot of buttercream. So 4 batches comfortably fit this container. Let's see if we can see the size. This can fit 236 ounces or 7 liters. So quite a bit of buttercream. It's very heavy. So now that all of our buttercream is in containers, it is time to wrap these with some saran wrap. I'm sure there is a more graceful way to do this, but I am by no means a saran wrap pro. So you also could use a bag if you wanted to, or whatever method you think is going to help keep your buttercream protected and safe. Okay, 1 down, 1 to go. So now that our buttercream is all ready to go, it's time to grab out our cake layers. So I just pulled all of my cake layers out of the freezer. I baked them, let them cool, and then I double wrapped them in plastic wrap. I'm also storing them on some cardboard cake rounds. It just helps them stay flat and also makes them easier to transport. So you can see underneath my cake layers I have some cardboard boxes, and these are going to go straight into there. And then actually this does not fit in my carry-on, so I'm going to attempt to carry this on as one of my carry-on bags and see what TSA thinks of that. I know that other people have done it in the past, so I think it will be fine, but that's going to be one heavy carry-on. So this is when you really feel like everything is starting to come together. You have basically done all the hard work, and the last thing to do is just get everything fully packed and then run through all the supplies and tools that you need to make the cake. So as you can see from my cake layers, I did not level them. I decided to wait to level them until I got to Chicago. I felt like that would help keep them moister, because as soon as you cut it, you're kind of exposing the cake to air. So by leaving that caramelization on, I feel like it's really just going to help keep it super moist. So this is not closing all the way, so that's going to be fun. So what I might end up doing is trying to tape this, and then I will see if it will still fit in my suitcase. I think it will. My God, that's heavy. That's going to be hard to carry through the airport. Alright, so we have our cake layers figured out for the most part, and now it's time to run through our tools. So I'm going to throw all this back in the freezer just to make sure it stays nice and cool until the very last second before we head out on our flight. So I'm going to walk through everything that I kind of think of from the very start of the assembly of the cake all the way to adding on the finishing touches. So of course I have a rubber spatula just because with the buttercream you really need to give it a good stir, especially when you freeze it and let it come back to room temperature. Sometimes you can get a lot of air bubbles in it. Sometimes you also might need to adjust the consistency and add a little bit more heavy cream. a serrated knife, which I'm going to be checking, don't worry. But it's important because I haven't leveled my cake layers yet. I wanted to leave all that caramelization on the cake layers because I think it keeps in the moisture, and so I wrapped them that way. But once they thaw, I need to level them and trim them if needed on the sides. And then once I do that, of course, I have to add the simple syrup. So simple syrup is just a mixture of equal parts of sugar and water. It's really great because it helps keep the cake nice and moist. I don't usually add simple syrup to my cake layers just because they're already pretty moist. However, when you level all your cake layers and they're sitting out as you're trying to assemble everything for a wedding cake, they can sit out for hours. So with that in mind, I think it's really important that you do add simple syrup just to be super safe and so you know that your cake layers are moist. The other thing is, I'm assembling this cake on a Thursday once I get there, and the wedding's not till Saturday. So it also just gives you peace of mind once you finish assembling it that you know when you cut into the cake on the actual wedding day, it's going to be delicious and moist. I have a small and a large offset spatula for assembling my cake tiers, making sure my buttercream is nice and smooth, getting sharp edges on them. And then of course I have bench scrapers. So I'm actually bringing two. I'm bringing one that has a bigger handle, which is great for smoothing sides. And then this thin metal one, it's a Teco. I feel like because it's thinner, it gives me a little bit more control. So sometimes I prefer to use this as well. So just packing that. It doesn't take up a lot of space, so I'm bringing two. Have some sprinkles to fill inside the cake, and I also have a pair of scissors. So scissors are important because we need to trim all of our, for me I use bubble tea straws as my supports, but we need to trim all of our supports to the perfect height as we make each tier and insert them to make sure that the cake is properly supported. So I have here some thick bubble tea straws. They are 1/2 inch in diameter. Got them on Amazon, super cheap. You could also use wooden dowels if you don't want to use plastic. I totally get it. But wooden dowels are really hard to cut. So I really prefer to use bubble tea straws just because you can use regular scissors to snip them as opposed to like literally a saw. Wooden dowels are challenging. Speaking of wooden dowels, so we have tons of straws to support the inside of the cake, and we also have some wooden dowels. So I'm thinking this will be my main central wooden dowel, but it's not super tall, it's only 1 foot long, so if it doesn't reach all the way to my top tier, I have some extra dowels just in case to make sure that everything is in place. I have some great little cutters here that are awesome for cutting flower stems, and then of course some floral tape which we're going to wrap around them just to make sure that none of the fluids from the flowers or the greenery leach into the cake. So I believe I have everything I'm going to need to assemble my cake. Fingers crossed. Joke will be on me. If you guys think I'm missing anything, let me know in the comment section. But the great thing about, modern day is that if I did forget anything, I can always order it on Amazon to the place where I'm staying in Chicago, and I think we'll end up being okay in the end. So I'm going to pack all of this in my suitcase with my buttercream and my cake layers, and I'll give you a quick preview of what that looks like. So starting off with my first suitcase here, I'm going to add my 9-inch cake layers and my 6-inch cake layers. I'm going to actually add a bunch of packaging material around the sides to make sure that everything is nice and secure. And then I'm also going to add some of my supplies into the other side. So I forgot to mention earlier, I'm taking my cake stand with me. So I'm going to disassemble it just to make it easy to travel with. I'm going to bring my non-slip mat here, which I'll fold up. And I'm just going to wrap a paper towel around the center of the cake stand just because it has some grease on it and I don't want that to get on my supplies. Alright, so now that that is in place, we'll add our bubble tea straws and just fill in the rest of this space. Alright, so that looks pretty good. I'm going to add some bubble wrap in here also just to keep things from shifting too much. I'm going to put this in with my buttercream. So I've been saving these up from like every Amazon package I've gotten for the last month, and now we're going to finally put them to use. That looks great. We'll close this. And then the moment of truth, pray for me. That literally fits perfectly. Thank goodness. So just as a reminder, you guys, the 12-inch cake layers I'm going to carry on in my hands through security and on the flight. So this is ready to go. I'm going to set this aside and then we'll pack our buttercream. So this bag I'm going to check. The buttercream is frozen solid. I think if this bag gets tossed around a little, like nothing too fingers crossed. I'm going to jinx myself, knock on wood. Nothing too bad is going to happen. I'm going to really well pat it, but it's also just so heavy because the buttercream, this is basically all butter. So I'm going to put this into here, and in addition, I actually wasn't able to fit the base of my cake stand in this bag. I could have, but I think it would have hit the cake layers and I'm worried that if it slid, it would have damaged the cake layers, so I didn't want to put it in there. So I'm going to attempt to fit that into this bag. This is like cast iron. It's heavy, it's very strong, so I'm not worried about it getting damaged. I just need to make sure that everything fits in here. So we'll start with our smaller container of buttercream. Everything fits. So before I started this process, I laid out my suitcases and I did check the measurements of everything to make sure that like my cake boxes would fit in here and that my Tupperware fit in here. But you just never really know once everything is full how it's going to play out, especially the cake layers. But I really recommend checking that before you get too far in the process, so if you do need to run out and get a different container or a different suitcase, you're prepared and you don't have any last minute stressors, because nobody needs that. You've already put so much time into this process. You just need things to work out in the end. So I need to add a lot of padding in here because I have that cake stand and there's kind of a gap here. I'm going to add this over the top here too, but I'm actually going to add a poncho to the top of this. So I'm going to be in Chicago for a week because I'm running the Chicago Marathon the weekend before this wedding, which is why this is a little bit convoluted, but I didn't have space in my regular bag for all my clothing. So I'm going to add that poncho into here. I think it's going to act as a great way to help keep everything in place, and it's wonderful because I couldn't fit it anywhere else. So when I say a poncho, it's just like a warm running poncho that you get after you finish a marathon. They give them to you at the end, and then you can reuse them in the beginning of a race before you start. If it's cold out, you can bundle up in this and then toss it away once the race starts. Don't worry, they donate all the clothing that are tossed at races, so it's kind of like a never-ending cycle of warm-ups. But I think that this is going to be perfect for this. This is actually going to work out great. The only issue I ran into is I was planning to use a 16-inch cake board or cake drum to build the wedding cake on, and that is not going to fit in anything I'm carrying. So I think that I will end up ordering a cake board to Chicago once I get there. So I can't believe it, but everything minus the cake board and anything else I may have forgotten is ready to go. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you find it helpful, or you'll be able to utilize some of these tips and tricks in the future if you ever have to do something similar and travel to make a cake. If you guys haven't already, be sure to click the like and subscribe button below, and hopefully I'll see you guys again soon.